At Gate 32 of JFK Airport, the air buzzed with the typical symphony of travel, rolling suitcases, overhead announcements, tired children, and the occasional sharp sigh of a business traveler rushing past. Among the crowd stood Daniel, a 38-year-old single dad with tired eyes and a quiet presence. He held tightly to the hand of his daughter, Emma, who at just 7 years old had already experienced more loss than many adults. Her mother, Daniel's wife of nearly a decade, had passed away 2 years earlier after a sudden illness. Since then, Daniel had done everything he could to hold things together, working overtime as a mechanic, skipping meals to save money, and saving every extra dollar for this one special trip. It wasn't anything extravagant, just a few days at a small beach town Emma had seen in a book, but to them it was everything. Daniel had carefully planned each detail, right down to a cheap motel near the boardwalk and homemade sandwiches in their carry-on. Emma had never been on a plane before, and the thought of flying filled her with giddy excitement. Daniel watched her bounce on the balls of her feet, eyes sparkling each time a jet roared overhead. For a moment he forgot his exhaustion. Then something unexpected happened. As they waited to board, an airline employee approached and asked for Daniel's boarding pass. She scanned it, looked up with a small smile, and said, "You've been upgraded to first class." Daniel blinked. "Are you sure?" "Yes, sir. 2 seats, first class. Looks like you were one of the early bookers, and the flight's overbooked in economy." He looked down at Emma, whose face had just exploded with joy. She didn't fully understand what first class meant, but she knew it sounded fancy. Daniel smiled, ruffled her hair, and thanked the woman. As they made their way down the jet bridge, he couldn't help but feel a flicker of pride. Maybe, just maybe, this trip would be the start of something new for both of them. But then, just as they were about to step onto the plane, he noticed a commotion ahead. A woman with dark circles under her eyes, clutching 2 small girls, was trying to manage her bags, boarding passes, and the chaos of twin 4-year-olds. One girl was crying because she'd lost her stuffed bunny. The other had kicked off a shoe somewhere behind them. The mother looked frazzled, on the verge of tears herself. She kept apologizing to the line of impatient travelers behind her, trying to bend down to comfort one child while holding on to the other. Daniel paused. Most passengers walked past her with polite indifference. Some looked annoyed, a few whispered. He stood still for a second, then knelt beside Emma and quietly said, "Hey, what do you think about going on a secret mission?" Emma tilted her head, curious. "Like spies? Exactly. We're going undercover, in the back of the plane. It's very important." She giggled and nodded, clearly excited. Daniel walked up to the flight attendant at the front of the cabin and leaned in. "I'd like to offer our seats to that woman with the twins," he said softly. "They could really use a break." The flight attendant raised her eyebrows. "Sir, your seats are in first class." "I know, but we'll be fine." She smiled, nodded, and quietly handled the exchange. As Daniel and Emma moved to row 32, cramped, no window, he made it into a game. He whispered to Emma that they were agents hiding from imaginary villains. She played along, whispering codes and looking over her shoulder for spies. They laughed and shared a pack of cookies from his backpack. Every so often, Daniel glanced toward the front of the plane, where the mother now sat comfortably, her daughters fast asleep across her lap. He didn't think much of it after that. He didn't need a thank you. He didn't even tell anyone what he had done. It just felt right. Emma eventually fell asleep with her head on his arm, and Daniel leaned back, letting out a slow breath as the hum of the engines soothed the cabin into calm. 2 hours later, a man in a tailored suit tapped Daniel gently on the shoulder. He handed him a folded note. Daniel looked at him, puzzled, but the man only nodded once before walking back to first class. Daniel opened the note and read it. The note was written in clean, deliberate handwriting. the kind that suggested composure and education, yet every word radiated warmth and urgency. Daniel blinked as he read the first line, "Dear Sir, I saw what you did." He paused, momentarily stunned. He hadn't thought anyone had noticed. The note continued, "What you don't know is that the woman you helped is my wife, and the mother of my daughters." Daniel's heart skipped a beat. He looked down the aisle toward the front of the plane, where the woman was now sleeping, her arms protectively wrapped around the two girls curled beside her. The cabin lights were dimmed, and soft music played overhead, but in that quiet moment, everything seemed to sharpen. He read on, "She was having a panic attack before the flight. We've been going through a difficult time. She hasn't flown alone with the girls since a very traumatic event a few years ago. She was on the verge of canceling the trip altogether. I couldn't be there today. I had business overseas. But when I said goodbye to her at the terminal, she was trembling. Then you came along, and everything changed." Daniel's eyes lingered on the handwriting. The words were simple, but their meaning hit him like a wave. He glanced down at Emma, still curled against his arm, breathing softly. He thought about how many times he had faced panic himself, how many nights he had cried quietly so she wouldn't hear. He understood that fear, that helplessness, that exhaustion. He knew what it meant to keep moving forward for someone else's sake, even when your own heart was breaking. He returned to the note. "I watched you from the gate monitor. I saw you give up your seats without hesitation. You didn't do it for recognition or applause. You did it because you saw someone in distress, and you acted." The man's words were a mirror, reflecting a truth Daniel hadn't acknowledged in a long time. He wasn't just surviving. He was showing Emma how to live, how to care, how to recognize the weight others carry and still choose to lift it. "What you may not know is this: my wife is more than just a mother. She's also the CEO of this airline." Daniel's eyebrows lifted slightly. He hadn't expected that. He glanced again toward the woman in first class, now peaceful, no trace of the panic he had seen before. She looked strong in her sleep, like someone who had weathered a storm and found shelter, if only for a few hours. She doesn't talk about her position often, not because she's ashamed, but because she wants to be seen as a mother first. But today, you reminded her of something even more important than leadership. You reminded her of compassion, and for that we are forever grateful. Daniel let the note rest in his lap for a moment. He felt a strange mix of emotions rising in him: humility, surprise, a bit of disbelief. He had only done what felt right. In a world that often rushed past discomfort and turned away from need, he had simply paused. He looked at Emma again. She stirred a little, her hand reaching out for his. He gave it a gentle squeeze. Maybe she wouldn't remember this exact moment years from now, but the values behind it, the reasons her dad gave up something nice for someone else, those would leave an imprint. He hoped they would. The note wasn't finished. "When you land, someone will be waiting for you. They'll explain everything. Please don't worry. This isn't about publicity or repayment. It's about acknowledgement. It's about the kind of world we want to live in and the kind of people who shape it." Daniel folded the note carefully and tucked it into his jacket pocket as if it were something sacred, not a reward but a reminder. He leaned back in his seat, still processing everything. The steady hum of the plane engines surrounded him, and for the first time in a long while the noise felt comforting. Around him, other passengers continued their flight, some asleep, some reading, some scrolling through their phones. No one knew what had just happened. No one knew that a mechanic from Queens had quietly changed the course of someone else's day, even their life, by giving up a seat he never expected to have in the first place.